Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we will talk about the Dardanians. The Dardanian kingdom was an ancient power that came to be relatively late in the Balkan scene. Its foundation is approximated to have been on the 4th century BC. It peaked on its early years and kept on being important up until it was absorbed into the Roman Empire, a fate many of our past civilizations had the pleasure to end with. The most fascinating things we know about the Dardanians are from the legacy of its leaders, and not much else, to be honest. In fact, I have to admit I could barely find any primary sources about the Dardanians for this episode. These guys are really mysterious. Even Wikipedia, the ultimate source for sources, was filled with books about Macedonia at the bottom of the page.
Bloody brilliant!
So this episode will be a bit lacking in first-hand sources and cultural info. Greeks and Macedonians always seem to talk about them as a distinct group in the Balkans, but we really don't know why. There could be two reasons for it. They were either culturally separated from the Illyrians, or they were politically separated. If so, it means that their kingdom was powerful enough to have a lot of influence in the area. It's hard to say exactly. However, I personally think that the Greeks and Macedonians saw them as more civilized than the other Illyrians, therefore prefer to refer to them distinctively. Today, Kosovians claim to be direct descendants of the Dardanians. They probably have just as much evidence to show than most other modern nations in the Balkans. Their claims are still stronger than the northern Macedonians.
Constantly taste the salt.
Let's get right into the history of the Dardanians, shall we? According to our best sources, Dardania owes its foundation to its first king, Bardilis. He rose from being a humble coal miner to the leader of a nation through charisma and values. His impact was something to be feared. He beat Amintas III of Macedon in 392 and had Macedonia as a puppet for a while until they settled with a peace agreement with tribute in 372. In 385 he went on to invade Epirus with the assistance of Dionysius I of Syracuse until he was pushed back by Sparta. Bardilis was very successful in his campaign until Philip II arrived and beat him in battle in 358 at the Battle of Aragon Valley when he was 90 years old. During the battle, Bardilis died. To take on his legacy will be his son Cleitus. He inherited a weaker Dardania than his father had built. The borders gave Macedonia a defensive advantage. However, Cleitus was no fool, and so he staged a rebellion and seized the city of Pelium in 335 BC, together with another Illyrian leader called Glaucius. At this time, Philip was not king of Macedon anymore. His successor, Alexander the Great, had taken his place. So, as you can imagine, the Dardanians were utterly demolished in Pelium and Cleitus was killed. After this disastrous defeat, it's unclear who was running the Dardanian state for the next 30 years, but all hints seem to point at Glaucius. He was the leader of the tribe of the Taulanti, and he was a great general. He is mostly remembered for attempting to protect the young Pyrrhus of Epirus during a crisis in his kingdom, but let's not talk about that yet. In 295, the Dardanian kingdom is taken back by the founding dynasty thanks to the arrival of Bardilis II. When Glaucius died, he was able to retake some of the old territory back. Then he won over all of his estate by beating his heirs and other Illyrian natives. It's important to mention that Bardilis II was Bardilis I grandson and the son of Cleitus. Very little is known about Bardilis II other than his family origins. From his history we can tell that he was a good general, friended Pyrrhus of Epirus, and made an alliance with him, and even let one of his daughters marry him. I'd call it a bromance, but there was a significant age gap between the two. In fact, Bardilis' reign only lasted 5 years. He was followed by his son Mononius I, He is the king we know the most about, and he led his nation well against the Celtic invasions of the early 3rd century. Before this invasion, he allied himself with Thracia and Epirus against the Macedonians, who were having a bit of an internal dispute in regards to the throne. Nothing really came of it, and King Ptolemy became the new king of Macedon. Meanwhile, a huge horde of 150,000 Gauls coming from Pannonia was moving south, heading for Macedonia, looking for land and riches. Macedonia and Dardania were equally matched at this point, but they couldn't hold on against the horde alone. Honorius I offered 20,000 of his soldiers to Ptolemy, but the young leader refused, leading to his defeat in 280 BC. The Dardanians were later able to defeat the horde, so there was no real damage to their holdings, even though their army and economy was severely crippled for decades to come. Macedon and Thrace, on the other hand, had most of their bordering territories overrun and settled by many Celtic tribes. Tylis is the most famous of the bunch. Honorius also minted a lot of coins, and his tomb was found during World War I, where a lot of archaeological findings were made. This is to this day one of the few Dardanian sites we know of. In 270 BC, he was succeeded by Mytilus. He is remembered for two main things. He minted more coins with his name on it, and he waged war against Epirus, which didn't go very far. It was during this war that the first encounter with Rome was made. They were allies of the Epirots, so their relations didn't have the best start. In 230, Mytilus was succeeded by Longarus. He scored quite a lot of victories against Macedonia and even expanded the Dardanian borders south and east. He also befriended his Pannonian neighbors in the north and the Illyrians in the west, who frequently helped them kick ass in Macedonia. Yet, the strongest ally Longarus was able to make was Rome. Romans, turns out, they hated the Macedonians just as much as the Dardanians did, so against most odds became friends. By the end of the 3rd century, Dardania had surpassed Macedonia in military strength. This was probably the highest point it ever reached, militarily speaking. Unfortunately, this also means that it's all downhill from here. Longarus had two sons, Battus and Honorius II. The first one to rule was Battus. He did so for 30 years, from 205 to 175 BC. He aided Rome in the second war with Macedon, and he did very well, but after the war, relations with Rome worsened. Meanwhile, the Illyrians were growing stronger in the form of the kingdom of the Ardii. They had been around for a long time, but relations had sadly worsened. Meanwhile, Macedonia orchestrated another invasion that would cripple the Dardanians once and for all. He encouraged the tribes of the Bastarnae to move in the area, and so they did. Plans for this invasion date back to the last days of Battus's reign, but it was Honorius II who had to face them. Sadly, Dardania lost a lot of land and prestige from this war. A few years later, Macedonia conquered the area, ending its dynasty. When Macedonia was conquered by the Romans, Dardania became a puppet with some autonomy, but it was eventually absorbed into the Roman Empire in 28 BC. The history of Dardania is pretty epic, but I wish there was more to say about their culture and ethnicity. I even had to guess how most of their kings looked. I also found very interesting how they were basically destroyed through a conspiracy by the Macedonians. So yeah, this was all I have. If you happen to know anything about Dardanian identity, be sure to let me know. I might make a follow-up video about them if I get enough info. Thank you so much for watching. Join the Discord and check out my Patreon if you dare. Take care, and I will see you next time.